Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 102. What is courage? This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the novel Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing very good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in the writing world, I've finally gotten through all the edits from my editor, so I've updated that and sent it back to her now for round 2, which usually goes a lot faster. Just little things that she didn't catch before, maybe. I didn't catch. So that's it, yeah. So moving along. Finally feels like we're getting close here.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And how about you?
I have more chapters under my belt in Meridian, which is the third book in my science fiction series, The Adventures of the Empyrean Guard. I'm about halfway through the book now. Very excited about that. So
Thanks.
Just moving forward on that.
That's great.
Thank you. And what interesting stories have you come across lately in books, movies, or television?
I've just been slowly working my way through Skyward Book 4, which is the last book in the series,
okay.
I believe. Yeah, that's it. How about you? Have you read or watched anything cool?
So you have enjoyed the series so much that you pushed through the entire series.
Yeah, this is the end of the series.
Great.
I think. Yeah.
For me, I've been reading Skyward, which we're talking about today, and still reading Lord of the Rings as sort of my cozy comfort. Still watching Doctor Who. I went through a couple of episodes. I forgot that, like we talked about, that I started to skip stuff that I didn't like, but there are also some incredibly brilliant episodes in this season. This is the Martha season, and I had forgotten how brilliant some of the episodes were, like the one where he becomes a human and goes and becomes a professor at a school in 1913.
Yeah. With the family.
Yeah. I forgot how absolutely incredibly well acted that was. It's a great episode. So I was really quite moved by it and how well it was.
I like that one too.
It was done. Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a two-parter, right?
It's a two-parter. So I've been moving through the Martha series. I'm getting close to the end of the Martha series, just one Doctor Who episode at a time. And I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, yeah, I've been watching the old HBO series Band of Brothers, which is not, fantasy or sci-fi. That's pure historical. Very kind of sad.
Yeah.
So I'm only watch one episode of that a day too, because it's kind of intense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So as a reminder to our listeners, if you're interested in reading Mike's books, he writes The Tales of Zara. He is currently working on book 2. Book 1 is available on Amazon as well as in paperback from retailers throughout the country, throughout the world. And I write science fiction and time travel. I have a time travel series that's available, the Temporal Protection Core series that can be found on Amazon, as well as the Adventures of the Empyrean Guard, which are not yet available to be purchased, but can be read in draft on Patreon. And all the links for those books are in the show notes. Are you ready to talk about Skyward?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's go. Today we're talking about the novel Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. And for those of you who haven't read the book, there will be spoilers. If you don't want to know any more about this story, I invite you to go find a different podcast. There are some really cool ones in the playlist on YouTube. I'm going to read now from the back of the book. This is the blurb from the back of the book. Defiance is survival. Spence's world has been under attack for decades. Now pilots are the heroes of what's left of the human race, and becoming one has always been Spence's dream. But her fate is intertwined with that of her father, a pilot himself who was killed years ago when he abruptly deserted his team, leaving Spence's chance of attending flight school at slim to none. No one will let Spencer forget what her father did, yet fate works in mysterious ways. And an accidental discovery in a long-forgotten cavern might just provide her with a way to claim the stars. Did you like this book?
Yeah, I really like this book. I think for me, it got my attention very quickly, maybe in the opening chapter. I really liked the way he set up, the situation with her and her father, and it gets us quickly into the hardship that Spencer faces, right? What our protagonist is dealing with. And I think Sanderson did a really good job of making you feel for her plight right off the bat and root for her, especially when she gets rejected for the thing that she wants most. And she's been studying for so long. She's been dreaming about this for all of her life up to that point. It's something that she really wants, right? So we want it for her. And then when we see that potentially getting taken away, we feel for her. And we're rooting for her to not give up. And of course she doesn't. So I thought that setup was really good. Gets us into the story and into her character very quickly. I loved her going into the cave and finding Doomslug and Mbot. I thought that was great. Those are really cool characters. I liked that she had a sort of fellow outcast in Raj who ultimately wanted to do his own thing, but then she, ropes him into helping her fixing up Mbot. Thought that was really fun. And how can you not root for her having her own ship that she finds and repairs? I thought that was great, brilliant idea. And I like the growing camaraderie that she has with her fellow pilots and the secret that we know about that they don't know about, regarding who her father is. And I like the reveal of that and how it affected each of them and how they reacted to it. And I thought Sanderson did a good job of differentiating those characters. Sometimes the secondary characters all kind of feel like one blob. And we have, at least two or three where you're like, okay, you can kind of latch onto them. So I thought that was done really well. And I thought it was smart to have her father's former squad mate be the one to mentor her, especially when we learn what actually happened with them in the past and the concern that he must have over what happened with her father, potentially happening with her again. So I thought that was a really good setup. I thought there were good mysteries kind of sprinkled throughout that we, get to see pay off at the end. That's classic Sanderson, right? It does a lot of setup and building things up and then paying them off at the climax. And then also leaving stuff open for the future books, like how she starts to see the eyes that were talked about. I thought that was really cool. And overall, I thought the pacing was very good. I thought there was some good humor throughout. I really, really liked the character. I was really rooting for her. I thought the climax and the resolution were satisfying. And like we talked about, it, got me to read the next book and keep going in the series. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. What about you? What did you think?
I also enjoyed it. I thought, when you say that you got hooked in the first chapter, I think the first sentence of the prologue is absolutely brilliant. Only fools climbed to the surface. We learned so much in that one little sentence.
Yeah, that's true.
That the surface is dangerous, that they live underground, that she must be a fool because she's climbing to the surface. So we learn so much about her and the story, the setting, all of that in this really short little sentence. I admire that sort of simplistic yet so informative. In how many words is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? 6 words. And you learn so much about the story right off the bat.
Yeah, that's a good point. And
it's great.
It informs and also opens that question that you want in people's mind, right? That mystery of, wait, why?
Yes, exactly. And then I think part of the reason that I was hooked in this first chapter was how distinctive and interesting she was from the very beginning. You know, she was so funny and cute. A girl needed her toy starfighter with her just in case, but she doesn't need her stuffed toy. Well, maybe she needs her stuffed toy. I mean, it's just, you know, you're just attached to this kid right away. She's ferocious. She's a character, and you know, she's brave yet realistic. And I really enjoyed that. So that hooked me right away. And like you said, we've got this issue that comes up. In the first chapter, we see the problem right away. She learns about her father's issue right at the end of that first chapter. So now we know, like you said, what her challenge is that she has to face for the rest of her life, along with the other challenges of being a fool and climbing to the surface, which is dangerous, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, there's all these things. I think part of the reason that we really root for her is because, like in so many underdog stories, she's rejected from doing what she wants to do for a reason that's not based on her skills. Yeah. It's not a merit-based rejection. Right. It is a rejection based on something she has no control over, which is essentially the definition of your underdog story, overcoming that problem that is not their fault. It's not the fault of the underdog. But I think that thing that really kept me going is exactly what you talked about. These extraordinarily well done characters. They were not complicated characters. When you look at the characters and you pull them out, tease them out of the story, there's not much you actually really know about them. Yeah. But they're still so distinctive and so interesting and add to the narrative that they seem like there's more to them than they really are. And I think that is also a kind of genius, to create these characters out of such thin material, and yet they seem real, they seem substantial, and they help with the story. I was so impressed by that and really loved it, and definitely was taking notes about that. I agree about the setups and payoffs for the most part. There are some things that I wasn't crazy about here, but that's okay, because my gosh, there's just so much good stuff in this story that I too will probably continue the series. And which I can't say for other stories. I mean, I like Brandon Sanderson's writing a lot. I actually really like his writing a lot. But it took me twice to finish Mistborn. And then I got the next in the series and I wasn't that crazy about it. And I didn't finish the series. This one, I think, if he continues with this story in the way that he started with this first book, I'm seeing myself wanting to finish this series. Did you read Mistborn?
Yeah, I read the first trilogy, and I have very mixed.
So you finished the first trilogy.
Yeah, I have very mixed feelings on Mistborn. I feel like this Skyward book shows how much he's improved in his writing, which isn't to say Mistborn is bad. I just think.
Agreed. Yeah.
This book is paced really well, and Mistborn is not, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big differences. And also the characters are better here.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I think Mistborn is a good story, so I don't want people who love Mistborn to be offended. I don't think I was the right audience for Mistborn, because the character in Mistborn, I forget her name, Vin? Is that right?
Yeah, Vin.
She didn't appeal to me. She was a little too non-emotive, I guess, maybe. Whereas Spensa in Skyward is like a very dynamic character, so I enjoyed her. So I agree. I think, and I didn't actually look to see if this was before or after Mistborn, but I do think that this is, all the characters in this are just so well done, and I enjoyed their company, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too.
We like this book a lot, but is there anything that you might have changed as a writer?
I was trying to think about this because I read it a little bit ago now. My memories are kind of clouded with the second and third books too. So I was trying to think of like what the specific. I'm sure there were specific things as I was reading where I probably would have changed some of it, maybe a little less in the training sequences. But even thinking back, I mean, they don't train that long, and they're thrown into the actual battle pretty quickly, from what I remember. So I'm not even sure about that. I thought maybe some of the world building. Because Brandon Sanderson comes up with really cool things. He's very creative in coming up with different things for world building and characters and magic and things like that. So I thought all that stuff was really cool. But I did wonder, like, how did they have a functioning society with technology and things like that in such small groups living underground? It left me with some questions. but that wasn't really super critical to the story. So I don't even know if I would have changed that much there. But you said that there are some things that you would change, particularly with setups and payoffs, I think. So what would you have improved?
Again, I think that what the things that sort of stood out to me are very small things, and they may also just be very personal to me things. So like as a writer, I may have done something different here.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because otherwise, I think this is, like we've said, a very successful story and an enjoyable story. I kind of felt that there were too many deaths of her flight. You know, it's sort of like, oh, another one's dead. Oh, another one's dead. Oh, another one's dead. That was kind of, to me, started to feel a little repetitive. And I think that kind of goes to what you were saying about spending too much time in training. I think that we could have shortened up the training segment and lengthened sort of the figuring things out segment at the end and getting more information there to kind of figure out what's going on. It felt like Spensa went to see her mom and her grandmother and learned a lot of interesting things in a very short period of time. I think that segment could have been stretched out a little bit, where she got these conflicting stories from her mom and her grandmother. So then she went to do some more research, you know, in the in the archives, and learned some more things and conversed with her flight mates and kind of, I think there could have, that part could have been expanded a little bit, and some of the training and the deaths shortened a little bit, my opinion. I also found the end not quite satisfying. I think what I would have liked to have seen is at the very beginning, we get this wonderful picture of the world before she makes her choice and learns the lesson that she has to learn. We didn't really get the world after that. And I think I would have liked to have there have been an afterword of some kind where we see her now fully integrated as a pilot, doing piloty things as they plan to deal with the information they've learned about their enemy. Them setting forth what they're going to do next. And that, I think, would have given us that satisfying payoff of the setup of the world before. Now she's in the new world. This is how she's settling in the new world. This is what they're going to do now. Then thereby really giving us that tantalizing teaser for the next book. That's kind of what I would have liked to have seen there. Yeah,
that's a good one. Yeah, I could see that.
And then the third part is that, and it kind of goes a little bit into the theme piece, so I'm going to like bleed into the theme part here just a bit. This book had a lot of discussion about courage. I don't feel like we landed on it. Maybe I missed something, so let me know if I missed something, but I don't think we really landed on what Spensa decides courage is. You know, there's the question of courage. Is courage ejecting and saving your life so that you can go on to be a pilot again? Or is courage trying to land your vehicle, your spacecraft, and then dying because you can't? Is courage fighting back against what you see as lies about your dad? Or is courage finding out the truth and accepting that? Is courage supporting her father, which is what her mother was doing? And even if, you know, no matter what, she knows that he was a good man and he, you know, something happened there that was not about his courage. Or is it accepting that something bad happened and you still want to move forward like the way Cobb did? Or is courage acknowledging the history the way Gran did and moving forward even though there are scary things about it? So there's just all these different definitions of courage, but I didn't really feel like I understood where Spensa landed.
Yeah, okay. That's a good one too. How would you improve that then?
I think I would have had Spensa land on something about courage, and maybe even say something about courage to the Admiral, you know, kind of sum up what she thinks courage is with the Admiral. Probably even, I think maybe when so at the end there, she gets into the damaged spacecraft and flies it with no shields, and like she's going to try to stop the big bomb. I think when the Admiral was like, "What do you think you're doing?" I think that would have been the perfect moment to say, this is what courage means, and sort of defining courage for the Admiral, who had been defining courage for her up to this point, and reframing it. I think that would have been a perfect point right there to get her to land on what she's decided courage is after she's gotten all this information from all these people. I think that would have been a great time for it. I don't know. Okay. Just a thought. So let's
talk about, did you have another point
No,
there?
That was it. So I think I would be interested in hearing what you think about themes in this story, because I kind of like bled over into that area.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's Well, first of all, I think all your points are good. And theme-wise, yeah, like what is this story about at its core? I was thinking maybe it was going to be something about working as a team and finding that team because, she kind of does that. But it's not really that. She's still very independent and kind of just does her own thing.
Yeah.
She's like, well, I'm just going to do this, right? And it makes sense given her background that that's what her mindset would be, right? She's had to sort of survive on her own and be scrappy and work around the system and sort of make her own rules. So all of that makes sense for her character. So it makes sense that that's not necessarily what the theme is. And then, like you were saying, sort of courage and standing up and doing what is right. But then, as you pointed out, what's the definition of that? Which is the right thing at the right time? We kind of don't know. So what I came up with, and I think this is a bit Star Warsy, but it's more about believing in yourself to achieve your full potential. And
okay. I like that.
I don't know if that's what the theme is, so I'm curious to hear what yours are. But it's that Star Warsy feel I got isn't entirely surprising because I read that Sanderson himself, when he was writing this, or at least creating the idea for it, he was seeing it as kind of taking elements from Star Wars and Ender's Game, which I can definitely see those things blended in here. So, yeah. Anyway, that's a lot of words to say that's kind of what the theme I pulled out of it was.
Okay.
What did you get?
I like that. I think that's a good one. Mine, of course, was focused on the courage, and I have courage is in the eye of the beholder. I think courage.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, courage is kind of almost in a way a personal decision or a personal perspective, because only you know what your fears are, and of course, courage is the impetus to move forward in the face of one's own fears, and you have to know what your fears are in order to figure out where your courage is coming from and what your courage is overcoming. So,
yeah, so it's very subjective.
So what do you take away from Skyward as a writer?
What I took away was something we had mentioned, which was have a good cast of characters. I think he did a good job with this. In particular, making your secondary characters have their own ways to shine and using those secondary characters to show different viewpoints into your main character. So you have like loyal followers like Raj and Doomslug, right? They're kind of the sidekicky characters in a way. And then characters who are wary of her or who dislike her or who are willing to give her a shot. So each of the different characters in this group has their own view of her and shows that off and allows the reader to see those different aspects, right? So I think mixing up the roles of the secondary characters, that's my takeaway.
That's a brilliant observation, that whole spectrum of how these characters interact with her. I like that a lot. My takeaway is also about the characters, just that wonderful framework of simple yet differentiated characters.
Yeah, that's good. For me, that's especially important because I think it's, like you were saying, they're not necessarily super deep, complex characters, but they do stand out. And I think for a YA story, which this is the audience aimed at, it's a young adult. I think that's sort of the perfect characterization that you want for those secondary and tertiary characters. So yeah, that's great.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in the novel Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and all our subscribers. We're so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following, depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. If you have a favorite book, movie, or TV series you'd like to suggest for the podcast, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com, and those links are also in the show notes. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in the movie, The Matrix. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, very enjoyable. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.